When you think about the worst injuries you've seen on a basketball court, your mind may flash to moments like these.
Guy that probably hit the biggest shot in Cavs history. They're going up. Oh my goodness, his leg. Hayward has broken his leg.
But whether you are working out on your own,
yes, these injuries are gruesome, they make you want to throw up, but neither are as damaging to the athlete's long-term health as the notorious Achilles tear. Famous NBA players like Dominique Wilkins, Kobe Bryant, and DeMarcus Cousins have all suffered this injury. In the NFL, future Hall of Fame wide receiver Steve Smith and retired running back Arian Foster have ruptured their Achilles. Legendary soccer player David Beckham has ruptured his, and apparently Brad Pitt also ruptured his Achilles while filming Troy. There's a fun fact for you. And the weirdest part about this injury is that it can seemingly happen out of nowhere, with no visible change on the surface. Even doctors and physicians don't know why some people suddenly rupture their Achilles and others don't, which makes it that much scarier. Despite being a quote-unquote freak injury, you can expect about one Achilles tear per year in the NBA. And as we'll see, one Achilles tear per year roughly translates to one career-ending injury per year. In today's video, I want to cover the basics of what an Achilles tear is, a brief history of the NBA players who have ruptured their Achilles, and what that might mean for DeMarcus Cousins, and inevitably, the unlucky players who will suffer the same injury in the future. But first, I want to give a shout out to SeatGeek for sponsoring this video. Achilles tears are dangerous, but there's one guaranteed way for you to not rupture your Achilles, and that is to just watch a basketball game instead of trying to play basketball. You guys know what the deal with SeatGeek is. SeatGeek is an app that you download on your phone. You go on there and you buy tickets to sporting events, to concerts. The coolest features of this app are a couple of things. You can compare prices from different ticket selling websites. You can preview seats. Sometimes when you buy a seat online, you see something and you say, oh, that looks like a cool seat. And then you get to the arena and you're like, wait, I can't see anything. Well, with SeatGeek, they show you the seat beforehand. If that sounds interesting to you, you can download SeatGeek by clicking the link in the description or just type in SeatGeek in the App Store. When you download it, use my promo code MDJ for $20 off of your first purchase. Now back to the video. Okay, so what is an Achilles tear? The Achilles tear is formerly known as an Achilles tendon rupture. Tendons are tissues that connect muscles to bones. In the case of the Achilles tendon, it connects your heel bone to your calf muscle. There are many tendons throughout your body, but the Achilles tendon is the thickest. Tendons are tissues, so they're meant to stretch. Every time you run or jump, your Achilles tendon is stretching. Let me just demonstrate. Pardon my leg. Okay. If you can imagine, when you land on the ground, your feet's like this, and if you try to push off from the ground, you're just running or jumping, you essentially do this. So right now, this is where your Achilles tendon is fully stretched out, and when you push off, it shrinks back again. You can think of it as a rubber band, if that helps. To quote orthopedic surgeon Dr. Kevin Stone, it's designed to stretch. It's designed to absorb force when the athlete lands from a jump. It's designed to provide power for push-off when taking a running step. People who suffer an Achilles rupture describe the feeling of the injury as being kicked in the leg from behind. It's a more common injury than you might think. About 1 in 10,000 people per year rupture their Achilles, and amongst common people, it's usually older men. It's uncommon in sports injuries for it to be women or to be younger athletes. So the unusual Achilles rupture in the basketball player or a female is usually bad luck. Landing from a bad position, landing awkwardly hard on the leg, it's much more common in a 40 to 60-year. Most athletes choose to undergo surgery immediately once the Achilles tendon is ruptured. While most can start walking again in a boot within 4 weeks, it takes much longer to make an actual comeback, usually around 6 months in the NBA. Even then, the athlete needs at least another 6 months to regain full strength, if they ever manage to do so. We don't have an official count of how many players in history have suffered an Achilles tear, but on a case-by-case basis, almost nobody remains the same after this injury. The most famous tear in NBA history is probably Kobe Bryant, who tore it in March of 2013, and it was effectively the end of his career as a superstar level player. Even though he was 34 at the time, past his prime, he was still putting up 27 a game on good efficiency numbers, carrying the underperforming Lakers. And he clearly wasn't the same after coming back, statistically or just by the eye test. Another recent case is Rudy Gay. He ruptured his Achilles in 2017, and he came back and had a good but not great season for the Spurs. His numbers have dropped dramatically, and there's also a notable drop in athleticism. Wesley Matthews tore his Achilles in 2015. His defense has slipped a little bit and he's not quite as good as he was in his Portland days, but he's recovered most of his productive value. And as we'll see later on, the case with Wesley Matthews is actually one of the best in history, even though he, like almost everyone else, has not been as good as before he tore his Achilles tendon. Another recent case that I don't think people talk enough about, and this one's really interesting, is Brandon Jennings. Now, it's true that Brandon Jennings' best seasons in his career were his earlier days in Milwaukee, but his best month as an NBA player was probably the month right before he ruptured his Achilles. Check this out. Brandon Jennings ruptured his Achilles on January 24th of 2015. Between December 26th of 2014 to January 24th of 2015, Brandon Jennings averaged 20 points, 7 assists, 40% from 3, led the Pistons to a 12-4 record, and it seemed like that pretty putrid team was turning their season around and might even sneak into the playoffs. But then he ruptured his Achilles, and that was essentially the end of his career, even though he was only 26. He tried to make a comeback, he was terrible, the Pistons traded him away, and then since 2015, he's played for 7 different teams, including the Shanxi Dragons. I mean, at this point, in my honest opinion, he should just go back to playing in China. He did average 28 points per game in his first 13 games with China. And well, I mean, I guess to put into context, Jimmer Fredette is averaging 37. Anyways, so the Achilles rupture ruined Brandon's career. Otherwise, he would have had at least a good career as a very, very solid 6-man. Let's look at some other cases throughout history. And I tried to include almost everyone I could find. Chauncey Billups ruptured his Achilles when he was really old, 35 years old. He was still putting up 15 points per game though. After he ruptured his Achilles, that was basically the end of his career. He just, that's when it was finally done for him. Mehmet Okur. Do you guys remember this guy? The big center who shot threes? He started 73 games for the Utah Jazz, 30 minutes per game in the 2010 season. He tore his Achilles in the 2010 playoffs, played only 30 games over the next 2 seasons, and retired at the age of 32. Anderson Varejao. This guy has had so many injuries. We're talking broken wrist, broken ankle, back problems. He even had a damn blood clot in his lung. But which injury was the one that finally did him in? Yeah, you guessed it, the Achilles rupture. He hasn't been the same since 2014, and now he's in the Brazilian League. LaFonso Ellis, power forward for the Denver Nuggets in the 90s. He played alongside Dikembe Mutombo for some years. Very athletic dude, averaged 21-7 right before he tore his Achilles at the age of 26, and his career went downhill from there on out. Rashawn Leonard, this guy was on some of those 90s Heat teams with Alonzo Mourning and Tim Hardaway, one of the best three-point shooters in the league during his time. He tore his Achilles at age 30, only played 29 games over the next 2 seasons, and then retired at age 32, even though he could have had a much longer career as a sharpshooter. Isaiah Thomas, not the dwarf, I'm talking about the one that used to kiss Magic Johnson on the cheek. Yes, this one, Isaiah Thomas, Pistons Isaiah Thomas. This guy tore his Achilles in 1994. He was only 32 years old, but he just straight up retired after the injury. He didn't play a single game after he tore his Achilles, even though he was only 32 and still putting up 15-7. Let's go back even further. Elgin Baylor. This guy was still balling out at age 35, 24-10 per game. Ruptured his Achilles. The following season, he came back 10-5. To put it bluntly, Achilles tears ruin careers. Even if the athlete doesn't retire immediately after the injury, they usually don't even last more than 2 seasons. There's only one person in NBA history that has had, and I don't use this word lightly, a miracle comeback from an Achilles tear. And this is not some role player like Wesley Matthews who can just stand in the corner and shoot threes on offense. I'm talking about a superstar player, a superstar athlete. I'm talking about the human highlight film, Dominique Wilkins. One of the best scorers in the 80s and 90s. He tore his Achilles in 1992. He was 32 years old, a little past his prime, came back from his Achilles tear, and he somehow averaged more points on better efficiency during his comeback season. He played over 70 games and 37 minutes per game for the next 2 seasons, while still making the All-Star team both seasons. He was still dunking on people too. It didn't even seem to affect his athleticism. His comeback was so perfect that there's no other word to describe it but miracle. It's no wonder that DeMarcus Cousins is using Dominique Wilkins as motivation for his own comeback, because, to put it frankly, Dominique Wilkins is really the only one who can be used as motivation for someone who's just torn their Achilles. How did he do it? Nobody knows. It's likely some combination of consistent training, mental toughness maybe, genetics, luck. I don't know about other sports, but at least in the NBA, Dominique Wilkins is the only case of a star athlete who has suffered this injury and made a full recovery. Could DeMarcus Cousins become the second? Maybe. He's actually pretty young compared to other people, other NBA players who tear their Achilles, but still the odds are not on his side. You can then understand, with this history of Achilles tears, why no one offered one of the best big men in basketball a long-term contract this summer. You can tear your ACL and expect to make a full recovery with the right rehab. You can even snap your leg in half and still come back an all-star. But an Achilles tear, that's something else entirely. For an injury that occurs on a somewhat regular basis, the Achilles tear is the worst a basketball player can go through. Hopefully we'll see another Dominique Wilkins soon. Although in 20 years, everybody's going to be walking around with artificial Achilles tendons anyways. So it's not that bad. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. Stay cool.